Hi, I'm Brett Brooks with Goodman Games,
And I'm Brendan LaSalle with Goodman Games.
and today I want to talk with Brendan about the writing process and
Absolutely.
what's involved and how he creates the things he does. He's one of our most prolific writers. He has done some amazing things. He's also the creator of X-Crawl, of course. And today we're just going to go over how his writing process works. So
Cool.
Let's just start with that. What is your basic writing process?
So, I like to write longhand in the beginning stages. So, I've learned to keep really big, I like a big, nice notebook. So, when I'm just getting started, I feel like you can start from almost any beginning point, and you can start from a monster or a theme or a location. But once you have that, I'll do a couple of pages of just free associations where I'll just be like, I'll write down words and things that I want to put to see in an adventure.
That's what you're talking about right now, is writing an adventure.
Specifically for writing an adventure. Yeah, so I'll just sort of use that as a way to kind of get my creative juices flowing. I'll start with that, and then I start narrowing down on on like what I actually want the adventure to flow. While I'm doing it. So I'll think about, all right, what would it, I'm very much a convention GM. So I always think to myself, like, all right, how is this going to look? How does it start? How do we get into the adventure? What's my introduction going to sound like? What's that first, encounter going to be like? And then, I'll sort of like work from there. The first thing I do concretely usually is the monsters. I'll usually, before I actually start like.
Well, before you get into that, I've known you for a long time.
Yes.
I've actually seen your notebooks, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You seem to have a visual structure that you start with.
Yeah, I really do. I write in a kind of a. Now I can't think of the word for it because I'm a great writer.
Flow chart?
A flow chart, yes. Flew right out of my head. It flowed. I will very often I'll do a flow chart where I'll be like, all right, this will happen, and then what possibilities do we have when the adventurers do? They will run, they will fight, they will look for this, they will seek allies, whatever it happens to be. And just putting that down helps me kind of visualize it. So having all of that, I'll write my monsters out, I'll draw my maps, I'll make my notes, and then still from my notebook, I'm ready to run it before I actually start, create a file for it on the computer and start actually doing it in Word. So in the best of all possible worlds, I would like to run an adventure just from my notes in my notebook at least 3 or 4 times before I have to start writing it. That's how I'm most comfortable. It's how I'm most productive. Some adventures I think Hole in the Sky. I probably ran Hole in the Sky 20 times before I, actually committed that to a Word document. And like Neon Nights was way more than that. I must have ran Neon. I ran Neon Nights for almost 2 solid years before Joe.
And I assume that the adventure evolves over that time.
Absolutely. It evolves, and I specifically, every time I do it, I try to change something in there. You know what I mean? I'll change a monster up or a trap. I'll change the order of the creatures. The timbre of it, I'll do something differently with it every time. And I'll certainly react very strongly to anything that comes up in game. So if my players try to take it to a very different, crazy place, as players are wanting to do, I'll just follow them there and see. And you never know what kind of cool stuff you'll come up with from your adventure.
Well, what's the point where you decide this is the right version? This is the final one I want to put on paper.
Usually it's a harsh email from someone in the publishing world. Usually I would say there will come a point where I run it and I feel like it's just flowing, almost like I don't really even have to look at my notes very much. I've got it internalized, and at that point, that's when I can sit down and actually start writing it. And when I you can't always work that way. Sometimes you have to get a thing in right away, and you can't do it. But in the best possible worlds, I'd like to run a thing until I've really internalized it, and then go ahead and then commit it to paper. And I know a lot of the writers I work with don't work that way, but that's what works for me. And I think what I've really done over time is just worked on my process, and that's the thing that I can't recommend enough to budding writers. Learn my process not that you should do things the way I do things, but learn my process or any other writer's process as a way of figuring out what actually works and does not work for yourself. So, try it out. Try doing it that way. And if you're like, nah, this isn't for me, then try the next thing, But I've had enough time doing this where I've sort of fine-tuned the way I write adventures so that I'm able to, be at my most productive, my most creative, write my best stuff, through the way I've sort of like honed doing it over many, many years.
How long have you been doing this professionally? When was your first professionally published work?
My first professionally published work was the original X-Crawl core book, X-Crawl Adventures in the Extreme Dungeon Crawl League, which came out in 2002 from Panda Head Publishing. Here's the Panda Head man right here. Gave me my start in this business, and I'll always be grateful for that.
I wasn't aware, actually, that was your first. And
that was my first published gaming thing. Before that, I had some short stories and poetry that I'd rather no one ever. Let's just forget.
So, extra, gold star for anybody who digs that up and sends it our way.
Yeah, you find any of those pen names, we're gonna have problems, pal.
Okay. Okay. As a professional writer, because that is your primary job,
Yes.
You are a professional writer. How often are you writing?
I mean, I try to do something every day. In the modern world, especially at this time in my life, it's not always possible. But when I can't, I keep I'll keep my notebooks. This is part of my thing I'll do. I will keep the notebooks sort of like propped up under my computer screen. So even if I'm not working on it that day, I'm still looking at it. I'm still thinking about it. I'm still absorbing it. When I can, if I had my druthers, I would, once I actually started the process of creating the manuscript, I would like to work on that from beginning to end, and just all the way through, and just work on it every day until it's done. But it's more likely, just because life, just the way my life is now. I probably write, at least 4 days out of the week, if not 5, and try to look at the manuscript every day.
Yeah, and that's in addition. You're also the outreach manager
Yes.
for Goodman Games. So you have a lot of other responsibilities.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're working that in around those responsibilities, yet you're still managing to get that in. So.
Yeah, and that's actually that's always how it's been pretty much since the beginning. I've had a few times in my life where I could just work on one thing and only one thing until it was done. But in the early days, even after I started writing professionally, I certainly wasn't making enough money at it to where I could do that exclusively. So it was nights and weekends. I was driving a forklift, working, shipping and receiving, waiting tables, bar back, no end, catering, no end job. I could go on pawn shop, did that. And it was cramming it all in. That was all nights and weekends. But I would try to do something, all the time and get as much as I could get done around the stuff that I absolutely had to do.
Okay. And I know, I have, of course, background as to what's going on with Goodman Games right now. But just to let everybody else know, how many different projects do you work on at a single time?
I try not to do more than 2. If I've got 3 projects that I have like stacked up against each other, I get into a panic mode, and it's like, too much. I try to only keep it down to 2. So I try to not take a third one on until I've got one completed and one at least conceived of, and I'm working on it. But there have been times where I've had to juggle a whole bunch of them. That can be challenging, but there are ways that you can. I'll tell you my when I'm stuck like that, what my secret technique that I read someplace and worked for me. That what I'll do is when I finish the manuscript for the day, when I'm done and get ready to dust my hands off and go do whatever else, I will try to end it mid-sentence. This way, when I come back to it next time, the first thing I do is finish that sentence, and then I'm rushed back into that specific project, and I'm not thinking about the other things I have to work on. I've done that. Like I said, all right, finish that sentence up, and then I'm back into it. I won't say it works 100% of the time, but 80% of the time, that rushes me right back into it, and I'm not stressing the other projects I have to work on, and I can just go right back into what I was doing.
That sounds excellent. Excellent. Just to finish up here, what advice would you give to people who are trying to break into the gaming writing industry?
Okay, well, again, like I said before, absolutely work on your process. I have, you've got to figure out when is the best time for you to write. How is the best time for you to write? If you see my office, I have black walls and little fun things to look at.
It's true. His office is painted a deep charcoal gray. It's pretty much black.
It's so great. It's like writing in a cave. I love it. But that, I found a thing. I found it that it works for me, and I turn the lights off, and I just have the computer screen, and I just sail away into it. Everything in dark mode, and I just, can do it. But I put together a soundtrack for myself. That's different for every project, but that really helps. But that's I know some people would do better in silence though. So work on your process, figure out what works best for you, and then do it. And always be tinkering with it. You know what I mean? Consider yourself a disciple of the craft at all times, and never someone who has accomplished it. And now I know how I do it 100%. Always be working on that. Then when it comes to adventures, I cannot stress playtesting enough. Playtest. There's almost no upper limit on playtesting as far as there's no, I've playtested this too much. There's no such thing. The more you run your adventure, the better it's going to be. The more coherent it's going to be, the more it's going to feel like a unified whole. Just absolutely playtest absolutely as much as you can manage. And like I said, I do it before I commit, but I know a lot of the people I work with get a manuscript and then they run from that, and then they make changes to the manuscript as they playtest. That's a fine way to do it. Some of the best writers I work with do it that way, and try that, try it all. I have, so just keep working at it, and remember, you're writing an adventure. You're working within the rules of a role-playing game, and that's all important. But never forget that you're ultimately writing. Work on your writing. Work on the craft of writing good sentences, writing good paragraphs. Get yourself a copy of Strunk and White's Elements of Style, read it to tatters, and then get another one. I can't stress enough. There's so many people out there with great ideas and great adventures, but they don't write so well. And they haven't accomplished that yet, and the adventure suffers for that. So work on that too. And I'm not saying I'm no Hemingway, I'm saying, but it's something that I'm always conscious of and I'm always working on. I'm at that stage of a writer where I finish a project, I start the next project. If I go back and look at the one before that, I'm like, oh, that's a terrible sentence. How I'm so much of a better writer right now. I I'm still in that stage where I'm getting better every time because hopefully, I have a long way to go.
Hopefully you'll always be in that stage. Because like you said, as soon as you think you've got it down, that's when you've lost it.
Exactly.
It's writing is a never-ending improvement situation.
Yes, 100%. And I hope you'll take that to heart and take that advice and go out there and do it.
Well, you've heard it. We hope you guys have fun. I hope you learned something, and we'll talk to you again soon.